In this video, we are going to look at options for first removing noise to your composition in After Effects after you have created all the different layers in After Effects coming from Maya. In this file I have here my background, the diffuse layer, specular layer, surface scattering, transmission, and I have an ambient occlusion pass on top of it, and I have a little animation in which he just goes through. I don't have motion blur in this one yet, and I'm going to use a technique for removing some of the noise, although motion blur probably would take most of it, take care of most of the problem, but I have some noise. You can see here, if this object wasn't moving as fast, probably I would use the noise reduction so that I can correct the problem. So what I'm going to do is, before I apply it, because right now if I wanted to apply it, I would have to apply it to every single one of those layers in order to make the effect happen. So instead of doing that, I'm going to create a composition that will allow me to do that on a separate composition. So I'm going to go to my project window. Here I have my composition, which I have all my layers there, my AOVs, and I'm going to just simply right click on it. I'm going to say new composition from selection. That's going to embed one composition inside of the other one. So there is now composition 1, which is the one that we have with all the layers, but there is now composition 2 that has all the layers and all in a single one. I still have my whole sequence doing the effect. I think this sequence is just 19 or 20 frames long. So let me just double check. I'm gonna go back to my composition number 1, and yeah, it's just 18 frames long. So I'm gonna go to my composition number 2. I'm gonna just bring that down, that the length of it, so I don't go longer than that. And I'm going to try to see if I can remove some of the noise that came from Maya. That I probably could have taken care of that in Maya with increasing some of the samples, but sometimes you cannot get rid of them when you have a little time, or when your files are there in Maya taking too long to improve it. So here, the best way to do it is by adding a noise removal, or removing it. So I'm going to go to the effects section. I'm going to look for noise, and there are different type of effects that come up here that allow us to work with noise. One of them is for creating noise. The other ones that show up there, if you open that up, you see one that says remove grain. So I'm going to just apply that to my composition, and that will allow me to go back here and play with the settings. Also show me an area that is going to use as a sample for me to work with. I'm not going to move that. I'm going to just move the center of it in order to place it where I need it to be placed. This one is applying it to everything, to the photograph and to the CG. You see that by default, it's kind of doing is getting rid of the noise, but it's also giving this kind of like a dreamlike appearance to it. It's kind of softening a little too much. So I need to go back and look at it and see how that works. So now I have a 200 by 200 preview that shows this area. Now, if I can just go into the noise reduction, I can play with the values of it, and the number of noise reduction samples is 1, so I could reduce that one down a tiny bit, or I can try to reduce the number of passes. So I can try to say maybe 2 passes instead of 3. That kind of got rid of a little bit of the effect. I can also bring down some of this guy to say 0.5. That way that improves it. I still have some noise, but not as much as it had before. There are also different ways of doing it. You can have single channel noise, or multi-channel noise. And you can have, if you go to a single channel, it could treat the different colors so that you can work on R, G, or B depending on what you need. Maybe sometimes one of the colors is one that was going to more than the other one. You can have fine tune, so you can try play with the texturing. So maybe the textures can have a little bit more or less. Can see that this one is doing pretty decently already. Is blurring most of it, and again, as I said, I probably will get rid of it with a lot of motion blur, but in this case the photograph had some noise in it, so it was necessary to add it to that. You have additional filtering elements that you can play with, and matter of fine-tuning and trying to get into what you gives you the best, and then of course you can use an unsharp mask, which is kind of trying to generate if it moves the edges or removes the edges of the object. Unsharp mask will try to sharpen the edge of the objects a bit so that you won't lose as much detail as possible. Here the sampling, so how much samples you want to do. The higher the go, the slower your render is going to be. And then here is how much you want it to blend with the original, so that way you can have kind of like a kind of control of not having to apply it completely. Keep it at 0 there. Right. So with that, you could you simply, once that you've chosen that, you can simply just apply it to your render when you're submitting it to final render. And to do that, you simply come and say under the viewing mode, you change from preview to final output. That way you'll see the whole thing. You want to see it at 100%. You don't want to see it smaller because you won't have a chance to really see it. So you want to do it at 100%, and that way you can go and render out your composition.